China is the second largest economy in the world. It manufactures a third of everything you own. It holds over $750 billion of American debt. And most Western investors have almost no idea how it actually works, or why the decisions made in Beijing directly affect the value of everything in their portfolio. This is not a video about geopolitics. It is a video about money, specifically about understanding the engine that drives the second largest economy on Earth, why it is structurally different from anything you learned about in economics class, and what that means for your investments right now. Chapter 1. The fundamental difference. State capitalism. The first thing to understand about China's economy is that it does not operate like a Western free market. It never has, and it is not trying to. China runs what economists call state capitalism, a system where markets exist and private companies operate, but the state retains ultimate control over the direction of the economy and the fate of individual companies. The Chinese Communist Party does not just set policy from the outside. It sits inside the largest companies in the country, with party committees embedded in every major corporation, state-owned enterprises controlling entire strategic industries, and the ability to redirect capital, suppress sectors, or create entirely new industries essentially overnight. This is why what happened to Alibaba in 2020 shocked Western investors who thought they understood China. Jack Ma, the founder of one of the most valuable companies in the world, gave a speech mildly criticizing Chinese financial regulators. Within weeks, his company's $37 billion IPO was cancelled. He disappeared from public view for months, and Alibaba lost over $800 billion in market value over the following year. In a Western market, this is unthinkable. In China, it is the system working exactly as designed. The practical implication for investors is fundamental. When you buy a Chinese company, you are not just buying a business. You are buying a business that operates at the pleasure of the Chinese Communist Party, and that relationship can change overnight. Chapter 2. How the growth engine works for 4 decades. China's economy grew at a pace the world had never seen. Between 1980 and 2010, hundreds of millions of people moved from rural poverty into urban manufacturing jobs. Wages were low. Productivity was high. Exports boomed. The country built infrastructure at a scale and speed that had no historical precedent. The engine behind this growth had 3 main components. The first was manufacturing exports. China became the factory of the world by offering something no other country could match: an enormous disciplined workforce, improving infrastructure, and costs that made manufacturing anywhere else economically irrational for most goods. This created the trade surpluses that funded everything else. The second was investment, specifically infrastructure and real estate. The Chinese government directed enormous amounts of capital into building roads, railways, airports, and cities. This kept growth high, employed millions, and created the physical infrastructure of a modern economy at extraordinary speed. The problem is that investment-driven growth requires the investments to generate returns, and many of them did not. The third was credit. Chinese banks, most of which are state-owned, extended credit aggressively to fund both corporate expansion and real estate development. This kept the economy growing, but created enormous debt at every level of the system: corporate, local government, and household. Chapter 3. The structural problems. China's economy today faces a set of structural challenges that are unlike anything it has dealt with before, and understanding them is essential for anyone with money in global markets. First is the real estate crisis. Real estate represents somewhere between 25% and 30% of China's entire GDP when you include all related industries. For decades, Chinese households put the majority of their savings into property, not because they particularly wanted to be landlords, but because there were few other investment options available and property prices only ever went up. Then they stopped going up. Evergrande, once the largest real estate developer in the world, collapsed under $300 billion of debt in 2021. Country Garden, another enormous developer, followed. The crisis wiped out enormous amounts of household wealth, froze construction projects across the country, and left millions of Chinese citizens holding deposits on apartments that may never be built. The knock-on effects are still working through the system. The second is demographics. China's one-child policy, in place from 1980 to 2015, created a demographic time bomb that is now detonating. The working-age population is shrinking. The elderly population is growing. The dependency ratio, the number of retirees relative to workers supporting them, is deteriorating rapidly. A shrinking workforce means slower growth, higher labor costs, and an enormous pension burden that the state will struggle to fund. The third is the middle income trap. Historically, countries that reached China's current income level have struggled to make the transition from cheap manufacturing to high-value, innovation-driven growth. The manufacturing jobs that drove 4 decades of growth are increasingly moving to lower-cost countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Indonesia. Moving up the value chain requires institutions, rule of law, and the kind of creative destruction that is difficult to achieve under a system of state control. Chapter 4. What this means for your portfolio. China's economic trajectory affects your portfolio, whether you own a single Chinese stock or not, because the second largest economy on Earth is embedded in the global financial system in ways that touch almost every asset class. Commodities first. China consumes roughly half of the world's steel, copper, and cement. When Chinese construction slows, as it has dramatically since the real estate crisis, commodity prices fall globally. This affects the revenues of mining companies, energy producers, and industrial manufacturers everywhere in the world. If you own a broad global index fund, you own these companies. Supply chains second. The companies in your portfolio that manufacture physical goods almost certainly have some exposure to Chinese supply chains. The geopolitical tension between the US and China, semiconductor restrictions, tariff disputes, the push for supply chain decoupling creates ongoing uncertainty and cost for any company with significant Chinese manufacturing or sales exposure. Currency third. The Chinese yuan is managed by the government rather than freely floating. When China allows the yuan to weaken, it makes Chinese exports cheaper and more competitive globally, putting pressure on competitors everywhere. When it strengthens, it affects the earnings of Western companies with significant Chinese revenue. And direct investment fourth. Chinese stocks trade at significantly lower valuations than US stocks, partly because of the legitimate growth potential of the economy, and partly because of the political risk premium that investors require to hold assets subject to party control. That discount can be an opportunity or a trap, depending entirely on how the political environment evolves. Chapter 5. The honest assessment. China is not going to collapse. It is not going to become a Western-style liberal democracy. And it is not going to stop being one of the most consequential economic forces on the planet. What it is going through is a transition from the easy growth phase of cheap manufacturing and debt-fueled investment to a more difficult phase that requires genuine innovation, domestic consumption, and structural reform. Whether it navigates that transition successfully is genuinely uncertain, and the honest answer is that nobody, including the Chinese government, knows exactly how it plays out. What investors should take from this is not a specific buy or sell recommendation. It is an understanding that China's economy operates by different rules, that those rules can change quickly, and that the second largest economy on Earth demands to be understood rather than ignored, because whether you engage with it directly or not, it is already in your portfolio. China built the most remarkable economic growth story in human history over 4 decades. It now faces the most complex set of structural challenges in its modern history. How it resolves them will shape commodity markets, supply chains, currency dynamics, and investment returns globally for the next decade. You do not need to invest directly in China to be affected by what happens there. You just need to understand it. And if you want to understand how to position your portfolio for what comes next, how to read the market cycle, and know exactly where we are right now, check out my last video. Link is in the description.